If you change, your life changes. And nothing changes in our life until we change. So now when you feel abundant, when you feel successful, you feel unlimited, you feel whole, the experience is teaching the body chemically to understand what the mind is intellectually understood.
Why is it so hard to make genuine change happen in our lives? People want to change.
Yeah, I think the biggest difficulty in change is making a different choice. So 95% of who we are by the middle of our life is an unconscious set of thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that are automatically programmed into our biology. Well, I think we've been programmed quite a bit with our relationship with money. And we have a relationship with everything known in our environment. You have a relationship, a neurological network in your brain for your parents, for your cell phone, for your computer, where you live, where you've lived in the past, what you're going to do tomorrow.
How do you describe what you do?
I think we teach people the neuroscience and the biology of change. And the principle is just really simple. If you change, your life changes. And nothing changes in our life until we change. So one of the things that people come up against is why is it so hard to change? So we've kind of come down through a lot of research, a simple formula to help people to make transformations first in themselves and then their lives. And so we give people knowledge and information, and we use science as that language that to meet information, and we combine quantum physics with neuroscience and neuroendocrinology and psychoneuroimmunology and epigenetics and electromagnetism, and help people understand information that's philosophical, that's theoretical. And when you learn information, you make new connections in your brain. That's what learning is. But if you don't review it and if you don't repeat it, you don't think about it, those circuits prune apart within hours or days. So we run these courses, these events that are typically 7 days, where it's fully immersing yourself in this process of transformation. Give people the information. It's philosophical, it's theoretical. Have them understand it. They have to be present with it. But now turn to someone and teach it back to them, what you've learned, nerve cells that fire together, wire together. So then in time, you begin to install the neurological hardware in your brain in preparation for the experience. And the more you understand what you're doing, and the more you understand why you're doing it, the how gets easier, because you can assign meaning to the task and get a greater outcome. If you can't explain it, it's not wired in your brain, right? So it's so much easier to forget the information than to remember it. And it just takes repetition and attention to get the circuitry in place. And once you understand the what and the why, we set up the conditions in the environment to give people the proper instruction. And when you apply it, when you personalize it, when you demonstrate it, when you initiate that knowledge, and you get your behaviors to match your intentions, and you get your actions equal to your thoughts, you get your mind and body working together, you have an experience. Now, experience really enriches circuitry in the brain. And when those neurons organize into networks even further, the brain makes a chemical, and that's called a feeling or an emotion. So now when you feel abundant, when you feel successful, you feel unlimited, you feel whole, the experience is teaching the body chemically to understand what the mind is intellectually understood. So now the information is not in the brain anymore. The information is now in the body. And the person is embodying the truth of that philosophy, right? And somehow there's biological changes that take place as a result of it. The question is, okay, if you've done it once, you should be able to repeat the experience. And so if people go through a 7-day immersion and they keep repeating the experience, they begin to neurochemically condition their mind and body to begin to work together. And when you've done something so many times that your body now knows how to do it better than your conscious mind, now it's innate in you. You've become the knowledge. It's a subconscious program. It's who you are. So we teach people to go from that kind of philosophical, theoretical knowledge to the application, to initiate it, to ultimately get wise about why they're doing it. And so we study the neuroscience and biology, and we work with University of California, San Diego, and we publish papers, and we do extensive research really to demystify the process.
Why is it so hard to make genuine change happen in our lives? People want to change. They want to do different things. Why is it so hard?
I think the biggest difficulty in change is making a different choice. Now think about the New Year's resolutions. Everybody's very clear about what their intention is, what they want, whatever that is. But if you keep making the same choices, you're going to keep doing the same things. You're going to keep creating the same experiences. You're going to keep feeling the same emotions. And your biology and your neurocircuitry and your chemistry and your hormones and even your gene expression is going to stay the same because you're the same. But keep thinking the same way, keep acting the same way, keep feeling the same way, and do it over and over again. Those circuits in the brain ultimately become hardwired. And the emotions that are a response to someone or something, even your own thoughts, get conditioned subconsciously as a program into the body. So 95% of who we are by the middle of our life is an unconscious set of thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that are automatically programmed into our biology. So the first step to change is not thinking positively. You got to become conscious of those unconscious thoughts when you decide to make a different choice and it doesn't feel familiar. The thought that says, start tomorrow, it's too hard, just do it anyway, go ahead and make that choice, do the same thing. You're not good enough, you'll never change, you're too much like your parents, I failed last time. You have to be able to become so conscious of those unconscious thoughts that you would never go unconscious to that thought ever again, and that's change. You'd have to catch yourself, how you speak and how you act. If you want to be happy and you're blaming and you're complaining and you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're judging everyone, those behaviors are not going to make you happy. They're actually going to make you unhappy. So you got to become so conscious of those unconscious habituations that you wouldn't go unconscious and behave that way. And then, of course, you got to look at those emotions that are pretty much chemical residue from the past, and decide, does this lack, does this suffering, does this pain belong in my future? And that process of becoming so conscious that we don't go unconscious is the process of change. And how many times do we have to forget until we stop forgetting and start remembering? That's the moment of change. So the hard part about change is when you decide to make a different choice, get ready. It's going to feel uncomfortable. There's going to be uncertainty. You're not going to be able to predict the next moment. It's going to feel unfamiliar. So if the body has been conditioned to be the mind, then the servant is the master. So the body starts sending information back to the brain to think a certain thought so that you make the same choice, that you do the same thing, you create the same experience.
Comfortable, this is familiar.
Get back to the same feeling of suffering. That feels so much better than the uncertainty of the unknown. So going from the old self to the new self and crossing that river literally is a neurological, it's a biological, it's a chemical, it's a hormonal, it's a genetic death of the old self. That's the phoenix lighting itself on fire. And most people would rather cling to that familiar place than take a chance and possibility. That void, that vacuum actually is the perfect place to create it. And we discovered this, that the brain changes the most when you get to that point where you think you can't go any further and you want to quit. If you go past that point, that is the unknown. Now, the unknown has always been wired in our biology, that the uncertainty of the unknown is always a scary place. Is that a tiger in the bushes, or is that just a shadow? So the unknown becomes a very scary place when we're living in survival. So most people never take that chance and possibility. But if a person's actually taught how to execute in the unknown and there's nothing scary there, and they can apply the same principle and say, what thoughts do I want to fire and wire in my brain? And a belief is just a thought you keep thinking over and over again. So what is the voice in my head that I want to program my brain into thinking and believing? What behaviors am I going to demonstrate in my life if I'm going to not behave this way around this person or around this circumstance and I want to behave a different way? Let me rehearse in my mind, close my eyes, and get really clear on how I'm going to respond or behave in this circumstance. And the act of mental rehearsal literally grows circuits in the brain. Now your brain's looking like you've already done it. Your brain is no longer a record of the past. It's being conditioned and mapped into the future. So now you have the circuitry in place. So if you keep practicing that, the hardware becomes more automatic. It becomes more of a software program, and you start behaving that way. And then the biggest challenge then is, okay, if I'm not going to feel suffering, and I'm not going to feel pain, and I'm not going to feel judgment, but I want to feel grateful for my life, can I teach my body emotionally what my future will feel like before it happens. So once you start conditioning your body to an elevated emotion, and we tend to see that the heart-centered emotions tend to be the ones that produce the most dramatic changes in our biology. And the body's so objective, it really doesn't know the difference between the real life experience that's creating that emotion and the emotion that you're creating by thought alone. Then the body starts getting lifted in a lot of ways. So keep thinking differently, keep acting differently, keep feeling differently. That's your personality. Then your personal reality begins to change. And with people who cross that river, there's new opportunities, there's new experiences, there's new events that take place in their life. So that's what we teach.
What is blocking us from manifesting love?
I really think that the majority of people spend most of their time in a state of readiness in their life. They're always ready for whatever's going to take place. And it's like an idol. So the hormones that are associated with getting up and going and reacting stressfully, those hormones are hormones that create a primitive mechanism where we go into survival, right? And living in stress and living in survival is not a time for us to open our hearts, right? So get bruised, get damaged, get injured in your life. The stronger the emotion you feel towards that event in your life, the more altered you feel from that experience. The brain freezes a frame and takes a snapshot, and that's called a long-term memory. So people think about the problems that happened in the past, and they produce the same chemistry in their brain and body as if the event was happening. So what happens is the body gets conditioned emotionally into the past. So now the trauma or the betrayal is not just in the brain now, it's in the body. So the body, in a sense, gets programmed or conditioned to stay in survival. And when you're in survival, it's not a time to be vulnerable. It's not a time to open our hearts. It's not a time to create. It's in a state of arousal where we have to keep our attention on things that matter, the things in our environment, the way our body is feeling and how we're managing ourselves, and time in and of itself. So to change is to be greater than your body, to be greater than your environment, and to be greater than time. And so when we're stressed, it's really hard to change. When we're stressed, it's really not a time to change, it's not a time to create, and it's not a time to learn. So then this is a mechanism that's primitive in our biology. And to be able to tame the animal so that the animal self, so it's no longer in a state of readiness, trying to always predict the worst case scenario, just so you could be ready if it happens. It turns out that that's the conversion of those survival states into a state of creation. We've discovered some really important things about it. And if you teach people how to convert from that sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system, if you teach them how to trade resentment and impatience and frustration, justified or not, that's doing no good for you, for an elevated emotion, and actually practice making the chemistry that is associated with love. And in the beginning, it's difficult. And so if you place your attention on your heart, we discovered that there's a very low frequency that you can measure that actually goes up, that's indigenous to what the heart needs in terms of a life force to beat. So where you place your attention is where you place your energy, and all the things you can place your attention on, place it on your heart. Now, slow your breathing down, and if you can slow your breathing down, you can take your body out of that state of readiness. And when you slow your breathing down, you slow your brain waves down, and your body starts to move out of that state of sympathetic arousal. Practice feeling elevated emotions with your heart: kindness, care, love, appreciation, gratitude, and you'll get good at feeling that way if you keep doing it. So then when a person's in that state, the heart in and of itself, when it's activated like that, gets super organized. It gets coherent, and it sends a signal to the brain, literally in the form of information, to tell the brain, the survival system, to shut down, that the amygdala, literally, the lights go out. It resets the baseline for the trauma in the brain, and the body moves out of survival. And now it wants to create. And the heart informs the brain to get creative. And the brain goes into these beautiful, organized alpha brainwave patterns. And in alpha, we tend to imagine, we tend to create, we tend to dream. So the heart informs the brain. It's time to create. That's, I think, when we're in that state of inspiration where we're actually falling in love with what we're creating. We're bonding to that creation. And the stronger the emotion we feel, the more we remember that future. And I think that's how people really begin to make those changes. Now, getting there is a daily practice. Getting there is something that you have to keep doing. So the block for us to feel love is that if we're living in survival, you have to make up your mind that state is not a state to create and break away from the people in your life and your schedule and your phone and all the obligations you have long enough to reset just for a little period of time and to remember.
Yeah.
So you don't forget. I think that's where it becomes super valuable.
What is your thoughts around the identity of money and the psychology of how it plays in our lives? Because a lot of people want to make more, they want to attract more, but they're just struggling with just the concept of it.
Mm-hmm, yeah. Well, I think we've been programmed quite a bit with our relationship with money. And we have a relationship with everything known in our environment. You have a relationship, a neurological network in your brain for your parents, for your cell phone, for your computer, where you live, where you've lived in the past, what you're going to do tomorrow. That for the most part, the brain is a reflection of everything that we know, right? So along with that is our relationship with money. And I feel like I have a really good relationship with money because I work on having a really good relationship with everything in my life.
Did you always have a good relationship with money?
I think so. I think so. I've never really lived in lack. That just wasn't part of it. Even when I went to college and I had to take out student loans and stuff, I always figured out a way to always be a little bit ahead of the curve. And so let's back up and just look at how people form beliefs, because most beliefs are created from past experiences, right? So children, when they're in their early ages, their brainwaves are very slow. Like their brainwaves are in alpha when they're like 7 to 12. They're in theta when they're like 2 to 6 years old, and they're in delta like when they're newborn to 2 years old. And so these brainwave states are states that were really suggestible to information.
So when we hear information, we believe it.
And we accept it, we believe it, we surrender to it as if it's the truth without analyzing it, because there's no analytical facilities yet.
Right.
The analytical mind starts around 12 or so, 7 to 12, and that analytical mind is actually what creates a barrier between the conscious mind and the subconscious mind.
So before 12, roughly, what we see, how we model our parents' behavior, what they say to us.
It's all being programmed subconsciously, right? And so that's really, really important, because if you heard money is the root of all evil, money is bad, only certain people are allowed to make money, you have to work hard to make money, this is how you got to do it. And that becomes the foundation subconsciously. Recording an audio file. You just keep recording that audio file, it becomes a subconscious program, right? So a lot of people have a relationship with money based on either what they've been told or what they've experienced in their outer environment, right? So then we gain information from our environment, and the stronger the emotion we feel from experiences in our lives, the more altered we feel inside of us, the more the brain freezes a frame and takes a picture. And that snapshot is called the memory. So
based on an emotion.
Based on an emotion. The emotion alters our internal state. So you're going along as Lewis, feeling really good, and all of a sudden you have this trauma, you have this crisis, you have this shock, and all of a sudden you have this dramatic change in your internal state, and your senses get heightened, and then you freeze the frame and you associate this internal state with whatever it is that's causing it, right? And that's how we create long-term memories, right? So
are painful memories more powerful, or beautiful memories more powerful?
They're both equal.
Okay.
They're both equal, but the problem is I think most people experience from more the negative emotions, right? And those negative emotions really are derived from the hormones of stress, right? So the alarm system, the emergency system, creates an arousal inwardly. And that arousal is saying there's something dangerous in your outer environment, right? And it could be a person, a circumstance, an accident, or whatever. And that change in emotional state causes you to remember the event. You got to pay attention, right? You got to stay really and narrow your focus on the cause. So think about people who have relationships with money, right, from the past. All beliefs are based on past experiences. So you have an experience where you lose money, you have an experience where money's taken away from you, you have an experience where you don't have enough, you're living in a place where there's not enough money, or a family that's not enough money. Then the emotion that most people are living by on a moment-to-moment basis is lack. Like, I'm in lack of having something that I want, okay? Now, there's nothing wrong with that, because the experience changes your emotional state. You freeze the frame, you take a picture. The problem is, that's hardware. So we think neurologically within the circuits of that past experience, and we feel chemically within the boundaries of that emotion, which would say, for example, be lack, right? So now the person says...
Before you go on to the next thing, what happens to the body and the mind when it is in an environment of lack? Mentally or physically, I'm in lack. What is the body and the mind saying?
Yeah, so the body is saying, I'm waiting for some external event to occur. I win the lottery. I marry the right guy. Whatever it is, that you're waiting for that event to occur. That experience produces an emotion. So the emotion then takes away the lack. And so when we play the game in three-dimensional reality, the creation game in three-dimensional reality, we experience separation from everyone or everything, because our senses fool us into the illusion, the hallucination of separation. I'm here and you're there. I'm here and the door is over there. So I'm aware that I'm here at one point of consciousness, and the door is over there, another point of consciousness. Okay, so in order for me to get from here to the door, I got to move my body and do something through space. I got to do something, and everything in this three-dimensional reality is going to take time and energy, right? So, okay, so then here's Lewis right here, and then he says, okay, I want this experience in my future, and your brain automatically predicts and projects how far in the future you think it's going to take.
Maybe it's a year, 5 years, 10 years.
30 years.
Oh my gosh.
Right? Because that's what it's going to take to pay off that house, right? So now, one point of consciousness, I'm here. The other point of consciousness is where I'm placing my dream. So I'm separate from that experience. So then how do I get to that experience? In three-dimensional reality, you got to get up and you got to do something. You got to go to work. You got to drive to work. It takes energy. You got to fill your car with gas. You got to eat food. You got to work. You know, all this stuff. You got to sleep. You got to recover if there's stress. And now people are, in a sense, waiting for the experience that's 10 years down the road or 30 years down the road to happen, to take away the lack of them not having it. And unfortunately, many times when the experience finally occurs, they can't enjoy it because they're too exhausted, right? So you play the game, you go to school, you study really hard, or you study on your own, you develop some skills, you make the right choices, you start saving money, you start learning from your mistakes. And then the game is, how many things can you accumulate? And that accumulation then you associate with being wealthy or being abundant or being successful, right? And some people get really good at it, right? You can get really good at that. But for the most part, though, when we create from three-dimensional reality, we're creating from lack and separation. In other words, you're driving down the road and you see someone driving a car that all of a sudden you realize that you don't have. The moment you become aware that that person has that car and you don't have it, you're in lack of having it, right? So what the brain naturally does is it naturally creates you driving that car. And you have an image of yourself driving that car and you start identifying, wow, that would be a greater experience for me to have. The problem is the distance between the thought of what you want and the experience of actually happening for most people is the concept called time. Right? Between cause and effect, right? So some people develop the ability to manage themselves and manage their life. They develop certain skills and they can pay for it and they can get it very quickly. The problem is when the novelty of that experience wears off, you know, the car, and they're no longer identifying with that, and the feeling of emptiness and lack comes back.
They need to find something else.
They got to go and find something else. And so there's this game that goes on where you never have enough, right? And that's the lack game, right? So then if you think about people having the things they want in their life, when they create from lack and separation, it's the experience in three-dimensional reality that produces the emotion. And the emotion is saying, let's feel and experience this thing that you've been in lack and separation from. And that emotion then takes away the lack or separation. But you've worked really hard to get it. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Is there another way to do it?
Yes.
Okay, so the person who's living in lack is waiting for their wealth to feel abundant. They're waiting for their success to feel empowered. They're waiting for their healing to feel gratitude. They're waiting for their new relationship to feel love. They're waiting for their mystical experience to feel awe. That's the Newtonian model of reality, of cause and effect. Waiting for that event to happen to take away this separation or lack. Nothing wrong with it. It's the way most people create. But what we've discovered is actually something else. The moment you feel gratitude, your healing begins. The moment you feel worthy and abundant, you're generating wealth. The moment you're empowered, you are moving towards your success. The moment you're in love with yourself and you're in love with life, you'll create an equal. The moment you are in awe of life, you're going to have a mystical experience. And so that's causing an effect, right? So then if you can teach people then how to create, instead of from lack or separation, but create from wholeness, and create from what we call the quantum field instead of three-dimensional reality.
What's the difference?
Okay, so the way first of all, it takes knowledge, okay? The quantum field is an invisible field of energy that exists beyond our senses. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't hear it, you can't feel it. It exists beyond our experience of three-dimensional reality.